A poor shop clerk was fired for accepting a worthless rock. To settle a tiny debt, a prospector had signed over the deed to the side of a barren mountain. Bare stone. Good for nothing. His boss called it a foolish trade and threw him out. But that rock held the richest vein of tin on earth. And it would make this penniless clerk one of the wealthiest men who ever lived. They would come to call him the Rockefeller of the Andes. This is the story of the man who turned a single worthless rock into one of the greatest fortunes in history, and the mountain that, in the end, destroyed everything he had built. His name was Simón Patiño. He was born high in the mountains of Bolivia, poor and of mixed Indian and Spanish blood. In a country ruled by a small white elite, that one fact would shadow him his entire life, no matter how rich he became. As a young man, he had almost nothing. He worked as a clerk in a mining supply store in the town of Oruro, selling tools to the prospectors who came down from the hills. Then came the moment that changed everything. A prospector owed the store a debt of about $250, and he could not pay. Instead, he signed over the deed to a mining claim he owned, high on a mountain called La Lagua. Patino accepted it on the store's behalf. It looked like a disaster. The claim was nothing but a stretch of bare rock with no proven value. When the owner of the store found out, he was furious. He had wanted his money, not a useless piece of mountain. He forced Patino to take on the debt himself, and Patino lost his job over it. So now he was jobless, in debt, and the owner of nothing but a rocky mountainside that everyone agreed was worthless. He did the only thing he could. He went up the mountain to work it himself. For years, it gave him almost nothing. He and his wife are said to have dug at the rock with their own hands, hauling it out in wheelbarrows, living in poverty on the freezing mountainside. Most men would have walked away. Patino kept digging. And then, in 1900, he struck it. It was not silver, the metal that had made Bolivia famous for centuries. It was tin, and the vein he had hit was staggering. The ore ran as high as 58% pure tin, one of the richest deposits ever discovered. The worthless mountain was, in truth, one of the most valuable pieces of ground on the planet. And the timing could not have been better. For most of history, tin had been a minor metal, but the modern world had just found a new use for it: the tin can. Canned food was spreading across Europe and America, and every single can needed tin. Demand was soaring, and Patino now controlled the richest source on earth. The money came in like a flood. And here, Patino did something most lucky prospectors never do. He did not simply spend it. He used it to buy more. He bought the mines next to his. Then the mines beyond those. He bought railways to carry the ore and ships to move it across the ocean. He bought the smelters in England and Germany that turned raw rock into finished metal until he controlled not just the mining, but every step in between. Within 20 years, this former store clerk controlled more than half of all the tin in Bolivia and a huge share of the entire world's supply. His income grew larger than the budget of the Bolivian government itself. One man, born with nothing, was now richer than the country he lived in. By the 1940s, Simón Patiño was believed to be one of the 5 richest men in the world. The writer Malcolm Gladwell once estimated his fortune at over $80 billion in today's money, placing him among the wealthiest human beings who ever lived, ahead of names like Carnegie, J.P. Morgan, even Bill Gates. The poor clerk, fired over a worthless rock, had built one of the great fortunes in human history. But here is the strange, bitter heart of this story. For all his money, Patino was never accepted. In Bolivia, the old aristocracy looked down on him. To them, he would always be a mixed-race man from the provinces, no matter how many millions he had. When he returned home in his glory, and tried to join the exclusive social club of Cochabamba, the city near where he was born. They shut the door in his face. They refused to let him in. The richest man in the country was not good enough for their club. He was enraged. He was wounded. And in 1924, Simón Patiño left Bolivia for good. He would never live there again. He moved to Europe and built a life of staggering luxury, a mansion in Paris, a chateau on the French Riviera. He ran his global empire from afar and was even made an ambassador, which handed him tax breaks and immunity. He had the money, the palaces, the power. But he was an exile from the country that had made him, ruling its most important industry as an absentee landlord who would never come home. And far below, in the mines, the source of all that wealth told a much darker story. While Patino dined in Paris, the men who dug his tin labored in brutal, freezing, dangerous conditions, deep in the mountains, for almost nothing. Resentment built for decades. The handful of mine owners, Patino, the greatest of them, were seen by many Bolivians as an elite that served foreigners, drained the nation's wealth, and gave little back. The people had a name for this ruling clique. They called it La Rosca. Patino died in 1947 in Buenos Aires, one of the richest men on earth, far from the mountain that had made him. But his empire did not die quietly with him. In 1952, a revolution swept Bolivia. Crowds of miners filled the streets, and the new government did the thing that had been building for half a century. It seized the mines. The vast tin empire Patino had spent his life assembling, beginning with that single worthless rock, was nationalized, taken from his family, and handed to the state. The fortune itself survived, scattered across Europe in chateaux and bank accounts. But the empire, the mountain, the mines, the source of all of it, was gone. And here is the deepest irony. The tin that made him could not save the country it came from. Bolivia had bet almost everything on a single metal, just as it had once bet everything on silver. When world tin prices finally collapsed, the nation that had produced one of the richest men in history remained one of the poorest in South America. The mountain made one man richer than almost anyone alive. It did not make his people rich at all. A debt of about $250, settled with a worthless rock, built one of the greatest fortunes the world has ever seen. And like so many fortunes torn straight out of the earth, it left almost nothing behind. Just a hole in the mountain. And the question of who all that wealth was ever really for